Alright, this will be a response to Brainpolice's latest video on morality, which is just as bad as usual. First off, BP pronounces supervenience wrong. He calls it superinvenience, and let me explain supervenience. It's the idea that properties at a higher level supervene on properties at a lower level. For example, the beauty of the Mona Lisa supervenes on the atoms which make up the painting. Similarly, the morality of an action supervenes on the various atoms and energies which we conceptualize as an action. That's what Luddite was arguing for, which makes sense. You just need to find a standard of beauty or morality and determine which actions conform to this standard of beauty or morality. But that would just be morality in a descriptive and necessarily subjective sense, just as it would be beauty in a descriptive and necessarily subjective sense. It doesn't say one ought to be moral or one ought to be beautiful. What BP is talking about is normativity, oughts. Then Brainpolice says the debate about morality always devolves into metaphysics, and perhaps it does for him, but that's because, as usual, Brainpolice likes to make things up. But from what I can tell, these debates usually devolve into definitions, and Brainpolice just using words incorrectly, and it being like pulling teeth to get him to define things and to get him to say something clear and concise. He says that moral nihilists like me argue against morality on materialist grounds. And while I am a materialist, you can put a big red stamp on my forehead on that, this is not illuminating, and here's why. Consciousness is not something that can be physically pointed to, nor can values, nor can agreement. I will still say values exist, agreements exist, and that consciousness exists. But these all come fundamentally from something material, which are impossible to calculate. And because I believe there is a reality independent of my perceptions and that the schemas I project onto reality are just my own, I am a metaphysical realist. I think in terms of a lot of concepts, but those concepts are my own constructions that help me get through the day because I can't calculate at the atomic level. Now, I could be incorrect, but that's not the point for now. And no, just to preempt, conceptual relativity fits just fine with metaphysical realism. Just want to preempt that. Where does morality come from? Brainpolice says the moral nihilists are being hypocritical by not treating moral concepts the same way they treat physical concepts. But the thing is, material concepts refer to things that we can either see or we can deduce the existence of. I form moral concepts based on material interactions, tons of them. What material interaction could possibly necessitate an ought? Brainpolice then gets the definition of moral realism wrong, and I'm just going to link to the Wikipedia page on this. This is from Wikipedia. Moral realism is the meta-ethical view that claims that 1. Ethical sentences express propositions. 2. Some such propositions are true. 3. Those propositions are made true by objective features of the world, independent of subjective opinion. Then they quoted Richard Boyd, who made this very clear. Richard Boyd says that moral realism is 1. Is the proposition that moral realism is 1. Moral statements are the sorts of statements which express propositions which are true or false, or approximately true, largely false, etc. Okay. The truth or falsity, the approximate truth, of moral statements is largely independent of our moral opinions, theories, etc. And 3, ordinary canons of moral reasoning, together with ordinary canons of scientific and everyday factual reasoning, constitute, under many circumstances at least, a reliable method for obtaining and improving approximate moral knowledge. Okay, so it's objective morality. So, what BP is saying is that because I accept objective reality, I'm being hypocritical for not accepting objective morality. You see how that just assumes like morality is what's in question. Like we're trying to determine whether or not morality is part of reality. Okay. Now that's the correct definition of moral realism, or at least Wikipedia's definition. Brain police moral realism, on the other hand, just means that we can deal with morality as if it's objective, even though it's not. Brain police moral realism is that we can speak in terms of morality in the same way we can speak in terms of consciousness, which would be fine if we knew what morality referred to. Consciousness refers to a property that arises from the interaction of neurons, and an agreement refers to properties that arise from the interactions of clusters of atoms we label humans, typically an arrangement of neurons in the brains of both people, perhaps with reference to a contract or verbal exchange. BP is saying that morality can be something that doesn't refer to physical reality, or at least he doesn't describe this correspondence with physical reality, yet this morality is not transcendental either. Then BP blurs the fact-value dichotomy, and this is really stupid. Here's an example of a non-normative claim. There is a ball. Am I saying there should be a ball? Here's another. I'm breathing. See how many non-normative claims you can make. Non-normative claims can be false, and when stating something as a fact, you are assuming that your perceptions are telling the truth. But even that is a non-normative assumption. I'm not saying my perceptions ought to tell me the truth by whatever standard, but that they do. Even the schemas I project onto the world, that is the ball, when really it's just, atoms, quarks, down on forever or whatever. Even that schema is not normative. that schema is my attempt at describing. I guess if it was impossible to say there is a ball and you had to say there ought to be a ball, then Brain Police may have something of a point. But even then, that would just be a limit of language. Then BP accuses the moral nihilists of treating morality differently from other concepts, which is precisely the opposite of what's happening. It is because we cannot derive an ought from the material of reality that we say that oughts don't exist. I fail to see the hypocrisy. Now, the moral subjectivist will respond by saying, wait a minute, I thought of an ought, therefore oughts do exist in the subject. Oughts are subjective, which can be debunked analogically by saying, okay, I thought of a pink unicorn on Mars, therefore a pink unicorn on Mars does exist subjectively. Right? The thought of an ought does not equal an ought. Or, I thought of God, therefore God. Subjectively. God is subjective. Okay? It's dumb. And the ought in everyday language is colloquial. If I say, Bob, you ought to lose weight, Bob can respond by saying, I like being fat. And that includes all the health consequences of being fat. In fact, I rather enjoy the exciting health effects of obesity. Then how could I respond? If he really values obesity, then there's nothing more that I can say. And so the ought, that he ought to lose weight, is revealed as colloquial, as nothing more than a veiled appeal to Bob's own subjective valuations. So I have no problem using shoulds and oughts in everyday language. I just don't take it too seriously. Brain Police, on the other hand, thinks it's something profound. Brain Police closes by saying we're all just in a juvenile crusade against morality because of the mean things our parents did. Right on. Making videos on this topic, which are all in response to videos which are specifically directed toward us, equals crusading. Great call. But even if we assume that he's correct and we're all pushed toward moral nihilism because of the way our parents treated us, so what? People with bad religious experience turn away from God. People with bad experiences with anything can be propelled to oppose that thing. Does that mean they're wrong? Don't know. Case by case thing. Plus, all the arguments that I presented why Brain Police says.